Hello there, welcome back to my Pauper Flophouse of Fun. I'm Jecht. You'll find an accompanying article to this over at pneumotgaming.com. This week we're looking at another one of the red decks. I covered goblins in a previous one, and while this deck does indeed have a bunch of goblins in it, it's got a different philosophy. This is the red deck wins style of red decks, as opposed to like the burn deck. And if you've seen it before, you'll be familiar with most of these cards. The difference between like this deck and the other decks is this one is based on like making 2/2s for one, and then making some more 2/2s, and then possibly some more 2/2s. So you just flood the board with as much power as possible and try and overwhelm the opponent. And the burn is mostly just there to finish your opponent off, and also clear out blockers. Because obviously in the burn deck you don't normally want to lightning bolt your opponent's creatures. So yeah, we have the standard 12 1-mana 2/2s. You basically always want one of these on turn 1. You don't really want to play Goblin Bushwhacker turn 1, but you can, especially if you're following up with Mud Brawler Cohort. Cohort and Valley Dasher form the 2-mana 2/2 haste creature package. Most other decks have Rakdos Shredfreak, which is a 2/1 with haste for 2 red. But I found that to be very underwhelming. There's so many 1 toughness creatures in the format, or 1 power creatures, I should say, that just sort of end up hanging around that your opponents can't block with very well because all your creatures are 2/2s, and then you play a Rakdos Shredfreak, and you know all of a sudden their Elvish Visionary or their Fairy Miscreant can like block pretty well. So I like to play a couple of Porcelain Legionnaire. It is not a haste creature, but it is way better when your opponents are putting up resistance and you need to like attack a bunch of times. It can attack through Seagate Oracle and Archaeomancer and all that sort of thing without dying, which is very important to me. It does. The fact that you have to pay a couple of life usually isn't that big a deal since you should be the fastest, although, you know, it's not superb against burn by any means. We have a lone Renegade Freighter in this deck. Freighter just seems pretty sweet. How exactly sweet it is still open to discovery rather than debate, because we haven't played enough with the Freighter yet. It's obviously sweet in a bunch of decks, and here it's just a one-off. The deck does have a low land count, and you can't play too many 3s, so it's possibly better than like just Inner Flame Acolyte. But we'll see. We'll find out how good Renegade Freighter is. I like it because it can attack through Gurmag Angler, a card that this deck has quite a lot of issues with if something bad happens to your Goblin Heel Cutters. Inner Flame Acolyte's just another like haste creature that you can play on 3. Ideally, you want to be playing it and attacking for 4 with it to join up with your other creatures, but in games where you're sort of stalling on lands, you've only got a couple and you've got multiple heel cutters in your hand, you can just evoke it. You can play a Conscripts or a Jackal Familiar or something, and then evoke to attack with that creature for 4 instead. So it's fine. I've never been super impressed with it, but that's alright. Heel Cutter, I actually think Heel Cutter is basically the best card in this deck. You have so many of these 1-drops that need other creatures. Even your like Mud Brawler cohorts need other creatures. And just attacking with a creature that is hard to kill, because it avoids all the sorcery speed removal, although that is becoming less prevalent recently. It also helps you get past gigantic blockers like early Gurmag Anglers, and it's just all round really good. Like when your goal is to put as much power on the table as possible, being able to remove a blocker and force them to basically block the heel cutter while your other creatures attack is great. The fact that it just keeps all these things attacking is such a huge bonus. I'm happy to play 4 of them. It gives you something to do with your mana, as well. Lightning bolts, we're fairly light on burn because we're heavy on creatures. We have 32 creatures in our deck. So only like 2 chain lightnings as are still pretty good, but obviously lightning bolt is the best. You have like only a couple of fire blasts, since like as I say, like a lot of the time the burn spells are going to the creatures, but you know, it's always nice to top deck a fire blast. We have 1 Searing Blaze because clearing out, there's lots of creatures at the moment, and clearing out a creature plus dealing 3 damage is great. Sometimes obviously getting the landfall is semi-difficult, but I've never found it to be too much of a problem. 18 lands is relatively high, I guess. Like it's a low land count, of course, and no doubt you'll be wondering where any Forgotten Caves are. But unlike Burn, it's like if you have a hand in Burn where you have to play a Forgotten Cave in turn 1, it's not that big a deal because your Lava Spike will still deal 3 damage at a later point. Whereas in this deck, if you're having to play Forgotten Cave on turn 1, it's a disaster, because especially if you're on the draw, because then you're not casting any creatures. Then the turn after, then you're maybe playing Jackal Familiar and still not being able to attack on turn 3. So drawing into the battlefield tap land as opposed to basic mountain is such a huge disaster when you're trying to like peel a 3rd land to dash in and kill your opponent, or play Valley Dasher plus Bushwhacker or something along those lines. But I just want to stick with mountains. Also, keeping 18 as opposed to going lower means you get to mulligan less. This deck mulligans atrociously, since all of these creatures really need other creatures to get going. So if you mulligan to 5, sometimes you're in real trouble, especially if you don't reach 3 to Dashing Heel Cutter. So as high a land count as we can justify, just so we have to mulligan less. And you can usually use the mana. Sideboard, nothing too outrageous over here. We have some Electrickeries because they're obviously good against elves and fairies and so on. Flame Slash, because Affinity keeps being super popular, and sometimes you also need to like blow up larger creatures. Pyroblasts. Yeah, I mean, no one's really surprised by these inclusions here. Smash your Smithereens over Gorilla Shaman because, I mean, we want to smash blockers out the way. We want to deal damage. We're aggressive, and we can't really take advantage of, let's say we play a Gorilla Shaman, we've got 2 mana, we destroy 1 land, and then our Shaman dies. We're not really taking advantage of that because all their 4/4s will still be there. We can't, kill Mirror Enforcers with Gorilla Shamans, so just smashing blockers out the way is basically what this deck wants to do. And a couple of Sylvault Lifestaffs for the other red matchups. I could easily see playing more of these. I've certainly seen other 5/0 decks just playing 4 of them because it's so good in the red matchups. But I haven't seen that many of them in recent times, so I just played more of the sideboard cards that I thought would be relevant. Obviously, I may well now get smashed by tons of red decks as I go into a league. Hopefully, I will see you there for round 1.